Okay, we're going to start the urinary system, and basically you will have some notes, just one page, just on the front. And so it's in yellow to indicate urine. And so basically we have the primary organs, and this system doesn't have a lot of organs, thank goodness, after digestive. And so urinary system is just going to have two kidneys, right and left. It has two drainage tubes, which is called the ureters or ureters. And then it's got one bladder and then one urethra. And so is the male and female urinary system exactly the same? Yes, except for one tiny difference in the guys. The urethra has three specific parts to it, and it runs through the penis. The girls, we have a direct tube out and an opening. And so, with the guys, urethra is going to run through the penis. So when I talk about the urinary tract today, I'm going to talk about the female versus the male. We will talk about the male urethra when we get to the male repro system. All right, and then we have a few accessory organs, not too many. We have a retroperitoneal membrane because the kidney and the ureters sit behind a membrane, which is really the parietal peritoneum on the abdominal wall. And so basically it keeps the kidneys vertical, that retroperitoneal membrane. And you'll see this when we dissect the cat also, how it sits behind there and the ureters, so that it is definitely maintaining a vertical position. All right, and so then we have a couple hormone producing glands that help the urinary system. We have the adrenal glands is going to produce some hormones, and we'll talk about that in another video. And the pituitary gland will make some hormones that will help maintain blood pressure. So the adrenals and the pituitary are going to make a couple hormones to help us maintain blood pressure. And then we have the penis. That's an accessory organ because it holds the male urethra, and then it's got urethral sphincters that basically will help hold the bladder closed at the base, and then they release to allow the urine to come out. So those are accessories. So the number one job of the urinary system, the number one job is associated with the kidneys, and that would be filtering your blood of excess waste materials. And we'll go over that in another video. And then another job of the system, and mainly the kidneys, again, is number two, basically, it's going to control your blood pressure, which means the amount of dissolved solutes that are dissolved in and floating in your plasma. It has to pull that stuff out so that the blood vessels don't get larger and then eventually pop, and that would be called an aneurysm, right? So we want to keep the blood cleaned up. We want the right balance of water and cells, plasma versus cells, to maintain good blood pressure. So that's the number two function. Number three function is osmoregulation of the blood, because this is what's going to keep you cool. You want to have the right amount of water in your plasma, which is like 90% water. And basically, then we want to also maintain the pH of the blood. And so pH of the blood is maintained by regulating the amount of water and dissolved solutes in the plasma. And so it is usually about a pH of 7.2 plus or minus 0.2. So those are the four big functions for the kidney and the entire urinary system, right? And if I had to add one more, it would be once you make the urine, basically you have to void the urine out. And so the fifth function for the urinary system would be release of the urine to the outside of the body, because you can't hold that forever, right? So anyway, that's called micturition. All right, so now over here, I have urinary tract, and basically tubular organs. All of them are tubular organs. And I do have another sheet that I will be giving you and posting on Moodle, and it already is posted on Moodle. These are the official pictures that you have to learn, and I have check marks by all the terms that you definitely need to know, because these are the ones that you will hear the most in your medical careers. And basically they're on these pictures on the wall from the medical companies, and basically then you'll be able to describe them to your patients and say them correctly. So anyway, I use all these terms in the urinary system. So you'll be learning those. These will also can appear on your lecture test. All right, so then another thing I will be posting on Moodle and also going over is the nephron, which is the structure that actually filters your blood. And so anyway, also it's associated blood vessels. And so right here, this is a copy from in your book, lab book, but I have also added additional things to it to make it more applicable and understandable. And then on the back, I have the renal subcircuit. This is how blood goes in and out, and you have to understand this for dialysis purposes. And also if you're going to become an x-ray tech, you have to inject dye, and basically you're going to see this pattern to see it up on the screen on an x-ray so that you know that the blood flow is going through correctly. All right, so anyway, that will also be posted on Moodle. And so those are the two sets of pictures. All right, so now what we're gonna do today is we're gonna do the urinary tract. So the urinary tract are all tubular organs. That means they have all the tunics, 5 tunics. And so we have 2 ureters. They're all tubular. So 2 ureters. And what's the function of the ureters? Basically, it's the move the bolus of the urea by peristalsis. And so I'll show you this in my picture in a minute. And peristalsis, remember from digestion, is always under control of number 10 cranial nerve, the vagus. And then we have one bladder, and what does the bladder do? It mixes the urea with water to produce urine, okay? And urine has a pH of 5 when it comes out, leaves the body, that's normal. We want it slightly acidic so we don't have an overabundance of bacteria in your bladder. And then another function for the bladder, it's going to release the urine by what we call micturition. So the tunica muscularis, which is also, they renamed the tunica muscularis, they actually call it the detrusor muscle. It's still smooth muscle. Basically, when the bladder becomes so large, like a balloon, before it could pop, basically it's going to put pressure on the muscular layer, and then the muscular layer is going to push back against that pressure, growing from the big lumen filled with urine, and then it's going to push against that pressure, and then it's going to push the urine out, and so that's called micturition, okay? So basically micturition is the term that goes in medical records, not urination and not voiding, okay? And so those terms you hear a lot, but you cannot write them in terms of medical records. And then the urethra's function is only it's an exit tube. And so basically it takes urine to the outside of the body, and that's when you micturate, right? All right, so now let's look at these structures, these tubular organs. The kidneys are solid organs, and we'll do a separate video, several videos on the kidney so that you can understand the function of the kidney, because it truly is the workhorse of the whole system. All right, so here are the ureters. The ureters right here, right and left, right here. They're long, thin tubes, and basically they're going to bring the waste material and the water, the blue water, down to the bladder. Here's the overall bladder, and then here's the urethra. So instead of drawing all the tunics, I just color-coded this for the ET, okay? And so simple cube ET right here, the orange, that is actually going to be the lamina epithelialis of the tunica mucosa, okay? So the lamina epithelialis right there is the simple cube ET. And so here it is right here, and the bottom half of this tube changes to transitional ET. The purple is going to be transitional ET right here, the bottom half, right here. Transit ET. All right, and so top half, simple cube ET, and that's what predominates in the kidney. And then the bottom half of the tube, when it gets close to the bladder, it changes to a transitional ET. And so what is coming down this tube by peristalsis? We have the bolus. The bolus is a semi-solid gel-like ball of waste material. And so it's going to get squeezed down the tube. Water just runs down by gravity, the water that's going to go into the bladder. And so the blue is the water. And so here it comes down the tube. Now urea has a pH of 6 when it's in the ureters, a pH of 6. And so when it comes into the bladder right here at the base, at the bottom, so the bladder is going to fill from the bottom to the top. And so here comes the bolus of urea and the water, and then it's going to mix together. It mixes and becomes urine, the yellow urine. And urine has a pH of 5, okay? And so the wall of the bladder is all transitional ET, right? And so transitional ET is all over inside the bladder. And I know in A&P1 we sort of lied to you and we said, oh, you only find transitional ET inside the bladder. Well, you didn't need to know all these other little specifics about it, but basically it is still in the urinary system. That's the only place where you're going to find the transitional ET. So back to the bladder. So here's the bladder, and then it has extra thick muscularis, tunica muscularis. And the name for that muscle, smooth muscle, instead of calling it the tunica muscularis that's going to squeeze this out, somebody decided, let's call it the detrusor muscle. The detrusor muscle, and so somebody named it that, okay? And so the detrusor muscle, right here, detrusor muscle, has just recently, within the last 10 years, been added. Instead of saying tunica muscularis, they say, oh, that's the detrusor, right? All right, that's nice. And so the pH, again, is a 5 of the urine. And how much urine does it hold? Well, basically, if you're a guy, it's from 300 to 400 cc's, okay? Females, 200 to 300 cc's or mils. And so basically, if you're over 6 foot tall, then you can add an extra 100 cc's or mils. And so basically anyone that's over 6 foot tall or even 7 foot tall, you can add an extra foot to the length of the entire digestive system. You can add, basically, your bladder's going to be larger because you have more square footage anyway in your entire body. And so basically, 300 to 400 for guys, and females 200 to 300 cc's or mils. All right, is how much is going to be held. All right, now, there's one interesting thing right here. I have little red things going up right here and here. These are called the urethral valves. And urethral valves are made out of the tunica mucosa. So they're made out of the 3 laminas epithelialis, basically the lamina propria and lamina muscularis. So they make like these one-way doors right here to prevent backflow back up into the kidneys. And why is this important? Because there's one bacteria that loves to come over and eat urine. And what is that bacteria that loves to come and eat urine? It would be E. coli, right? And so E. coli is the #1 bacteria that causes UTIs, right? Urinary tract infections, exactly. And you don't want UTIs. And one of the best things to take is a cranberry capsule. Cranberry capsule, because there's something in the cranberry fruit that basically keeps the pH at a 5, and then you're going to have lower E. coli. And so if you keep that pH at a 5, then basically the E. coli coming from your anus and your rectum will be lower, and then you'll have less urinary tract infections. So that is, you can look that up from one of your articles. That is one of the homeopathic methods that works not only for humans, but also for cats. Cats get a lot of urinary tract infections and have issues that way. And you can actually give these little soft gel capsules to them, and it will take care of a lot of trips to the vet for your animals. Dogs too, but dogs don't get as many UTIs. All right, so anyway, so urethral valve prevents the backflow, tunica mucosa, made out of. All right, so now these 3 openings, this opening to the ureters right here, and so if I make like a triangle to include the 3 openings right here. The 3 openings right here, one ureter, 2 ureter, and now here is the base of the bladder right here, and we have another opening. And so these 3 openings right here, the 3 openings are called the trigon area. And that just means right here, the trigon, the 3 openings, the 3 lumens of the tubes. So we got the ureter tubes, and then we got the beginning of the urethra. So here is the urethra, the tube that's going to drain the bladder, and the upper half of the ET is transitional, and the lower half has to be stratified squamous ET. So I drew it in brown, and then surrounding the slit-like opening right here is stratified squamous. The opening is covered in skin, and that slit-like opening is called urethral meatus. A meatus means slit-like opening. That's from your bone markings. All right, and then when you micturate, out comes the urine, which has a pH of 5, and the higher the pH, the more bacteria you will attract from your anus and your rectum, which you do not want because of UTIs. So what is going to actually keep your bladder closed at the base? Basically, here's the internal urethral sphincter right here. Internal urethral sphincter. This is actually the tunica muscularis right up here is really, really tight in the urethra right here. Very tight. And so that's the tunica muscularis. And then around it, around the outside, basically, and around the outside of this meatus, is an extra layer underneath the skin, an extra layer of skeletal muscle called the external urethral sphincter. And that you can actually see, especially if you have a pet and you look at the urethral opening, you can see it almost looks like the anal sphincter, that it sort of puckers as it goes around if you look real closely on your pets, your dogs and your cats. And so anyway, all animals have them, but I'm just saying they're more visible on those 2 species. And so basically, the external urethral sphincter is going to make it pucker a little bit, and that is from the skeletal muscle. So do you have control over the external sphincters? Always. You always have some control over the external sphincters, absolutely. And so it's skeletal muscle, and you have some voluntary control. Does it also have involuntary control? Yes, it does. But it mainly has a lot of skeletal muscle control, and that means the cerebellum in the brain is controlling that, helping you control that. If it's an internal sphincter, you do not have any control, so it's entirely smooth muscle, and basically it's involuntary because the medulla and the pons in the middle part of the brain stem right here, medulla oblongata and pons control it. So there you go. So those are the structures in the urinary tract, which are very straightforward and simple to understand.